Millennials for life, why the up and rising generation may be the one to have a final moral compass about protecting life than the generations that went before it. Next on the Campus Roundup. Hello, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is the Campus Roundup at the College Fix. Our top story segment this week focuses on the March for Life and how the topic of abortion is impacting millennials. To talk more about this, we welcome Jeremiah Poff, a student at Franciscan University of Steubenville in Ohio, and a journalist at the College Fix. Jeremiah, welcome aboard.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, you were at the march. Give us your impressions. Were there a lot of people there? What was the vibe going on? How did people get along with each other at the March for Life?
This is the sixth time I've gone, and every year it's the same. It's a vibrant group of young people who are mostly young people, not all young people, but mostly young people who are passionate about life and protecting life and are so joyful about it and are just really dedicated to ending the great evil that is abortion in this nation.
I think that's wonderfully said. And, you know, we know for a fact that when it comes to the March for Life, if there are 300,000 people there, the media is only going to report about 50,000. So I think you're exactly right that the numbers tend to be much larger than the media reports. And what does it say? I think it's really a fascinating thing that maybe, just maybe, the younger generation, the millennials, those 18 to 35-year-olds who have been so corrupted by their teachers in some way to believe really some silly things, might actually end up being the voice of conscience for a country that seems to have lost its way with regards to the rights of the unborn. Talk a little bit about the attitudes of millennial students that you bumped into in this March for Life.
Well, I think when you see an image like the ones of an aborted fetus, it's just horrifying. And there is no conscionable person that can look at that and say that that is okay. And, you know, I think that millennials are, you know, they have the world, the digital world at their fingertips. And they're able to see the extent of abortion in this nation and what it actually does, not just to the baby, but to the women and the fathers who lose their children. It, quite frankly, is evil. And I think it's being picked up a lot by the younger generation more, who tend to be more empathetic and more, you say facts don't care about your feelings. But in this case, the feelings are, I think, what driving this push towards a more pro-life position.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I mean, our generation has really done a poor job educating your generation in the sense that we've got you really queued up and sensitive to injustice. We're just kind of not giving you the information as what justice means. But here, I think you're right that abortion, particularly late-term abortion, but abortion in general, it is such an obvious destruction of human life. And so, in a way, this may be coming back to haunt our generation for giving you the sensitivity, and then you've got the technological eyes, as you say, to go out and see for yourself what the consequences of this kind of behavior is. I was blown away in your article for the College Fix just how many different issues and how many different statistics show that millennials are becoming more and more and more pro-life. Do you want to give a couple of the ones that stuck out to you from your article?
So the first one that I noticed is that support for Roe versus Wade is only at 7% when the respondents to this poll put out by Students for Life of America find out what Roe v. Wade actually means, which means, and what it means is abortion from the moment of conception until the moment of birth. And the other one that struck out at me a lot was that millennials want a voice in this. They want it out of the courts. I don't remember it was in the 40s or something, I think, that of millennials that they wanted to be able to vote on the issue and not have the courts decide it as it's been for the last 46 years.
That's an encouraging piece of activism, isn't it? That millennials want to return the right to decide these things to the American people where it should have been from the beginning. From the hashtag #MeToo movement, nine men in black robes decided this without any input from women. We're fond of hearing that, right, from progressives. In this case, they like it, though, because it gave them what they want. The very same weekend you guys were having your march, there was the hashtag #MeToo movement's march. And there's a horrifying video going around now about a young woman who is screaming that until she cuts the umbilical cord, that baby can be done. She can do anything she wants with it. And here you are pointing out that from a millennial point of view, justice must extend to living things, even in the womb, or you don't have social justice. Why is it, do you think, that generations that came before your generation often fail to miss that?
Well, I think that there was this overabundance of narcissism that came with the sexual revolution and the advent of contraception and this is, my personal belief is that the contraception, I think, in a certain way, encouraged abortion legalization because, at the time that contraception was legalized, it wasn't nearly as effective as it is now. The morality of it aside, but when Roe v. Wade, the number of abortions in this nation has continually declined since the high of shortly after Roe v. Wade, and then slowly it started to go down. I think every year now it's been lower than the previous year. Essentially, I think what's happening is that the sexual revolution has kind of ebbed a little bit, and people realize that that's a fact of human life inside of the womb.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point about that. I'd like to take it one step further. With the advent of contraception, it wasn't just preventing conception. You were basically promising generations of people that you were allowed to have sex. You could have sex without any biological consequence whatsoever. And then when the contraception occasionally didn't work, you had already promised those people sexuality without responsibility. So abortion then became an answer to that problem. And I think you're right. It's exactly the wrong way to look at it. Let me ask you before we sign off. While you were walking the streets, did you see any problems or any issues? Were you guys being harassed at all? And give us just a sense of what it took to report on this story as you were out and about doing your work.
There wasn't really any harassment, which I think is, and there never is at the March for Life. It's one of the most peaceful events I've ever attended, and it's continually, joyful. Honestly, the crowds are just, they're praying, they're singing. It's not, this profanity-laced tirade that you see at the marches the next day with the Women's March and other similar protests. And it's just a testament to what the positivity of this movement.
Jeremiah, it was a great pleasure to speak with you. Keep up the great reporting on these issues. Thanks for your activism, and we'll see you next time. All right, now time to shift to Talking Campus, our weekly discussion with members of the College Fix editorial team. Today, I am joined by College Fix Associate Editor Greg Piper to continue the conversation about the future of Roe versus Wade and the March for Life. Greg, you've attended the March for Life a number of times, haven't you?
Yes, at least the past 3 years or so. And it's been quite interesting, fairly consistent experience for at least these past 3 years. I have a little different experience than a lot of people, though, because I tend to march with the folks who would be considered the non-traditional pro-lifers, the ones who aren't associated with the church, who wouldn't be politically conservative, kind of the people that you would associate with progressive activism, but they believe that their activism compels them to support pro-life policies.
Yeah, I think that's remarkable. It seems to me that one of the great contradictions of our age for the radical left is that protecting the unborn seems like a no-brainer for their platform. Voiceless individuals who don't have a say for themselves. That seems to be something that would be right in their wheelhouse, and yet, contrary to what they usually believe, that doesn't seem to be the case. And in marching with these people who oftentimes have the progressive worldview, but who defend life, what's the primary argument you get as opposed to dealing with the progressive argument for abortion?
Their argument is generally that, like you said, we support life in all of its forms. We support policies that we believe will support life in all its forms, if it means being anti-war, if it means being pro-union. And it also means for them supporting the most vulnerable, the most marginalized people there are, people who don't have a voice. One of my favorite signs from the march, one that a lot of people really liked, there was a young woman carrying a sign that showed a drawing of Wonder Woman and a quote from Wonder Woman saying that I will fight for those who can't fight for themselves. This really goes back to the argument that are you going to speak for those who don't have a voice, who can't argue for themselves, in line with all of your other views of defending those groups you consider marginalized, who need someone to kind of go to bat for them. And it just stands in line with their beliefs. They are thoroughly consistent from having marched with these folks and talking with them. There is nothing unusual about them being pro-life. It flows completely from their beliefs.
And how do they get around with the traditional, oftentimes more religious pro-life people at those marches?
They tend to be okay. I'll tell you the one thing that bugs a lot of people, not just the folks I march with, is the graphic pictures of aborted fetuses. This rubs a lot of people the wrong way, but it's a free speech issue. It's a First Amendment issue. None of us are trying to shut down these folks. It's just a principled disagreement over what will be effective in actually converting people to the cause. The folks I'm with usually think that if you try to tell people you already have these principles, we just want to show you how these principles are in line with what we're marching for, instead of using kind of graphic images there, we think that'll be more fruitful.
Sure. Now, in terms of millennials, this is kind of an interesting thing. Jeremiah's article was really kind of wonderful. There's so many statistics in different categories with regard to different aspects of abortion in Roe versus Wade, where the millennial generation seems to be much more open and much more sensitive to the unborn. Can you give us a sense of why you think that is for the younger crowd?
I think it's a matter of being informed. One of the things that you often see with abortion advocacy is you want to stay away from specifics as much as possible. You use these kind of euphemisms like decision and choice and women's rights. You really try to push away from anything that reminds people what the act of abortion actually looks like, particularly who tends to get abortions and why they get abortions, which is a lack of economic opportunity, lack of family support, a boyfriend who doesn't want to have responsibility for the child he created. And when you actually tell them that, like this new survey from Students for Life, they kind of have to reconsider what they are thinking about when they think of abortion and what causes it and why people do it.
It is amazing, isn't it, that the millennials who tend to find themselves on college campuses really don't have access to what you just said. There's a one-sided narrative on college campuses when it comes to abortion, and it's the one you just listed. This is all about a woman's right. There is no other issue at play here. It's her body. She can do what she wants. Nobody else has any right, including the father, including the unborn child itself. So where are the millennials, do you think, beginning to find this information if they're not getting it at their schools?
They get it from their friends. They get it from personalities they maybe follow on YouTube who talk about this issue. I'll say about Students for Life, they do some great video work to actually bring these kind of hidden statistics out. PragerU is another source for this. They're using the avenues that young people are already following, online video to a large part, and word of mouth and social media. I find it fascinating, these survey results that show that even before people learn what Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton actually did legally, that they actually want to have a say on abortion policy. They don't want judges essentially inventing rights out of thin air. They want to bring common sense and kind of their own personal experience to this to actually have a vote. What the survey found was about 2 in 3 of these young people 18 to 34 actually want to have a vote on this. And that kind of surprises me. Before they learn anything, while they still have probably their misconceptions about what the Supreme Court has actually ruled, they still want to have a say on it. They don't think it's something that should be handed off to people just kind of inventing things out of thin air.
Last question for you, Greg. As somebody who's gone to a lot of these, who's thought about this very deeply, who comes from a slightly older generation, seeing the momentum among millennials is very encouraging. What advice from your perspective would you give them moving forward to make sure that this movement coalesces into something that has the power potentially to change things in 20 or 30 years?
They need to be pretty active on the ground, I would say. The march is really nice for once a year, but a lot of these groups can be involved at the campus level. They can bring this message to their peers. They can do activism in their local community, whether that's so-called sidewalk counseling outside of abortion clinics. They can also try to make their movement more intersectional, as it were, by doing more advocacy that shows that they are promoting life at all levels, whether that means food banks, pregnancy centers, other kinds of activism that really show they are reaching out to people who are in need, who need a helping hand, not in a way that presumes they're over them, but simply to say we want to be involved in these activities. We want our principles to be clear, and we want to build allies in places where we haven't necessarily looked for allies before. That can be all sorts of things. It doesn't have to be conservative activism. It can be among groups on the left. You should try to find coalitions and build them.
Great. Greg Piper, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for your time and for your unique perspective. We'll see you again soon. Perhaps the biggest takeaway in all of this is the fact that we have been engaging in social justice education with kids now going all the way back to elementary school. We've been grooming kids to be highly, highly emotional, highly sensitive to what their teachers claim is injustice. And just maybe that's starting to bite back a little bit. When we consider the social justice issues of our age, perhaps the one that is the least ambiguous is the destruction of babies in the womb. That is one of those things that, especially with all the science, the technology, and the imagery we now have, of what it takes to perform an abortion and the consequences of abortion, that you would think that a generation groomed to be highly sensitive, even if it doesn't always have the facts, would be repelled by what you see taking place from organizations like Planned Parenthood. And sure enough, that seems to be the case for 18 to 34-year-olds. In some ways, their moral compass is more finely attuned than ours. Just imagine what could happen with these younger generations if we could get them good information, really good factual information about a number of social issues to go along along with their fervent desire for justice, you could really have a transformational generation. And that's the Final Fix. Be sure to stay up on all the latest news and information from the College Fix by joining us on all of our social media platforms. For the Campus Roundup, I am Dr. Duke, and we will gladly see you next time.